The whole point of this was to really just kind of sit down and offer a little bit of an insight to people who don't have that. I was pretty fortunate, meaning that I got all this exposure to people in my family who were physicians, and I knew what they kind of did. So I got a feel for what that life is like.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe a little bit of a different generation at the time, but still I got to see what that was like. A lot of people didn't. I think about my wife, for example. She's an emergency medicine physician. She knew no one. She grew up in rural Wisconsin and didn't know anyone in medicine. She watched that show, ER, ED, whatever it's called now, and that was really the spark. But she didn't really know what she was getting into, to say the least.
I think it's fair to say, though, that even if you're raised around medicine, or at least I was, like my dad was a doctor, all my uncles, some of my aunts were doctors, you still don't know what the heck it is. Like, I didn't know what it meant even after shadowing people until, medical school, when I first had to, stay for a 32-hour shift. And I'm like, oh, okay, so, this is what that's about. And then you kind of just discover it as you go, right?
So even before you got to that point, right, there was probably, some conflict or something that led you into it, right? Saying, I'm going to go with the family thing, or I'm not. Were you just kind of easily going along? Or?
No, quite the opposite. Everybody that I knew was like, do not go into medicine. Nope, would not go into medicine. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Everyone in my family, my father's like, don't go into medicine. My mom would bring me to one of her doctor's appointments. I remember vividly, an orthopedic surgeon, that had operated on my mom. She's like, oh, this is my son, Adam. I was 13. And she's like, oh, he wants to be a doctor. And he looks at me straight in the eye. He's like, don't go into medicine. And I was just like, well, I'm sorry, I like it. I find it interesting. And I also watched ER. And that was my first glimpse really inside of the hospital. I even went and volunteered in a hospital in an ER in high school, thinking that I'd see something, really interesting. And I didn't, but I'm like, maybe if I keep going, then I'll see something cool. But I still thought it was something that wouldn't necessarily be a job, because I was a file clerk after school when I was 17 or 18, and I hated it. And I remember talking to my dad about it. He's like, well, if you don't like that, then you should do something where you get to use your brain every day. So it seems like you need to go to school. I'm like, okay, then that really solidifies me wanting to go into medicine.
Yeah, so that certainly gets you, going through the undergrad and getting into medicine.
Yes.
And then there are a bunch of other big decisions that come across. So I guess I'll take a little step backwards here and just kind of introduce what we're talking about. Ideally, we want to get an understanding across about where and how people get into things. My name's Alan Jagru, and this is a podcast that we're trying to start called So You Think You Can Doc. And I'm a general nephrologist, meaning that my basis is in medicine. So we also have Dr. Ali Ansar.
Hey, I'm Ali Ansar. I'm a urologist. And I'm still reflecting deeply on the point that both of you make. The urologist here.
Yeah, and what we wanted to bring is kind of a perspective from two different angles. One being a medical person and the other a surgical person, because they really are two different worlds. Adam Bregman is a transplant nephrologist, and he probably has his foot in two different worlds with that. And we're going to kind of get into some of his life and some of his decision-making that brought him to where he is, so maybe other people can get some insight into that. And so far now, we are now in medical school. And there's this division. There are people who are kind of gravitating towards medical specialties, in other words, using medications, but not actually cutting anybody or doing surgical procedures. There's some overlap. And then there are people gravitating towards surgical specialists, right, neurology. So something drove you more to the medical side, I assume.
Yeah. To be honest, I've never felt comfortable in an operating room. I still get to go into operating rooms now. I get to watch procurements or watch transplants, and it's interesting, but I just still don't feel comfortable. I still am the third-year medical student that I feel is about to get yelled at for breaking the sterile field. Yeah. So I just never felt comfortable. But to be honest, I started medical school wanting to be a neuropsychiatrist, and then I was like, I don't think I'm good at that. And then I immediately wanted to be a nephrologist because I had an uncle that was a nephrologist. And that's kind of what took off in me to want to do a medicine subspecialty. But yeah, never comfortable in the OR.
think there's two things there. So you're never comfortable in the OR. And I'm trying to connect that back to the other thing that you had said about everybody told you not to be a doctor.
Yeah.
Right? And so sometimes I think about it because I didn't really, that's probably the more natural response in a person to like walk into this room with a million different things going, 18 different machines beeping. I only realized how traumatic that scene is. I asked Robert to come to my OR. He's a PhD ergonomic researcher here at UW. I asked him to come in to help me like research ergonomics of my surgery that I like to do. And I could see it in his eyes as soon as he crossed that threshold into the door. I was like, oh my God, he's not comfortable. And I was like, how do I make him comfortable? And I couldn't think of it, but I was like, how can I make him comfortable? What we're doing, this is surgery. This isn't something that most people would be comfortable seeing.
That's your jam, though.
But here's the thing is, when I think about somebody told you not to go into medicine and you went anyway, there's something about surgery that has that same feeling. It's like, hey, you probably shouldn't be doing this, but you go anyway. Every time I go into the operating room now, I'm like, why am I like, was son at home? What am I still, and then you're still doing it, but like it's kind of like that call, like vocation, it's a call, like voca, it's a call over, right? And so like what called you into transplant medicine? Because something called you away from neuropsych, right?
Yeah.
It seemed like something was calling you there. It was like a siren or something.
And I felt instantly comfortable with nephrology. I got lucky in a lot of stages, especially in medical school with fantastic teachers and mentors in nephrology, but it just felt the most natural to me. The physiology, the pathophysiology, the complexity of the patients, just all of the, this goes up, this goes down, all of the exchangers, it just made sense instantly. And I just felt a comfort in it. And I was like, okay, these are my people. I'm awkward. They're awkward. This is great.
I think that these are my people feeling. That was one of the things that solidified urology for me. I was like, oh yeah, for some reason I feel comfortable around these surgeons, but not those surgeons.
Right.
Yeah. So it's interesting that's what you felt like. It's like, hey, there was some comfort there.
I'm a general nephrologist, but I saw some transplant, but I didn't really have a true interest in, hey, I want to do some extra training, right? Because it does require extra training most of the time to do another year, of transplant nephrology to say like, because in these subfields, when you go into them, they become your life. So you don't just add something to what you do. You almost have to leave everything else behind to walk into this. Like here at the University of Wisconsin, if you're a transplant nephrologist, that's what you do.
That's right.
You don't do anything else. It's such a big center. So that transition there, did you always have that? I guess, because you could have had that before you went into nephrology, that, hey, I'm going transplant. And rarely we get people who are like that.
And for me, it was certainly not. Initially, I was drawn to the electrolytes and acid base and glomerulin. That was definitely the infancy of our understanding, in the mid 2000s of our understanding of GNs. I remember hearing about, atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome being this is the coolest thing ever. And that was even before we had any agents to treat it. But kind of to answer your question, I went into nephrology fellowship being disillusioned, and I thought that I'd love all of nephrology, and I realized no, actually half of it I don't like. And that half is dialysis. I just people were talking about mineral bone disease and dialysis, and I just wasn't interested in those things. I'm where are those sexy topics that we used to talk about? Exactly. I think maybe transplant could be my way out so that I can be happy in what I do every day and not be bored or just sad. Because, I know for a fact, because we've spoken about this, that you have a different view of patients on dialysis. The connection with them and the longitudinal follow-up. But I've kind of found, because I have rounded in dialysis units for quite a long time, that there's dropout because of death. And it really upset me. And I was just drawn to transplant because I didn't have to see patients really on dialysis. And I got to see a lot of good, a lot of bad, some ugly, but a ton of happy. And that's kind of what drew me into it. And I remember speaking with my wife about it at the end of my first year of fellowship and going over the opportunity costs of taking another year of training and the pluses and minuses. And we both made the decision that, yes, I should do that extra year. And I'm glad that I did.
Yeah, it's deep, right? There's a lot there.
There's a lot to unpack.
A way out of, feeling trapped into things that you may or may not be truly interested in. It's very rare that any of us in the world find the perfect everything. I love every part of this. My way out, and sometimes I've talked about this, is my overlap into urology and my kidney stone world, where I have kidney stone patients. They all get better. They're younger. It's kind of like what you're saying. They get transplanted. And then they go to the dialysis unit, which is very different. But I've always had that craving for these longitudinal relationships, and that works for me, right? And everybody's different. And even within nephrology, there are other outs. Right?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
And some of them are procedure-based. So there's also like interventional nephrology, which we have a large group here. So when you think about the procedure part of nephrology, we talked about the surgical specialties and medical specialties. Nephrologists aren't safe from procedures, right? So we still have
a few
kidney biopsies and lines. Did you have an appeal for that, or did you just accept it as part of the job?
I was never afraid of bedside procedures. Like, I liked doing them during like internal medicine residency. I would always be like, oh, I'll place that line for you. Like, oh, I'll do the paracentesis or the thoracentesis or the LP. I liked those things. It didn't bother me. And in fellowship, I kind of pursued them too. But I knew that, in my life, I would be happy giving that up. Just like it was uncomfortable in the operating room, I'm not uncomfortable like doing procedures. It's just not my preference. I'd rather think and be like with patients or like trying to research the answer. But yeah, I mean, I do kidney transplant biopsies a ton now. But I'll tell you, in the job that I had before I came here, that they did not have a mechanism for which transplant nephrologists could do their own kidney transplant biopsies. So for 4 years, I would look at hundreds of biopsy slides a year and deal with the consequences of the biopsy, but would not do them. And I didn't feel like I was missing out on anything. And when I came here, it's like, oh, you have to do your biopsies? Okay, cool. Sounds good.
How often are you biopsying?
I mean, we do biopsies every week. Like, each of us pretty much have a day a week. But
what do you do in a day?
Like 2 to 3.
2 to 3.
Yeah, so
it takes a while.
No, really quick. I mean, you just like find a spot. I draw a line. That's where I'm going to go. Clean them up, numb them up, click, done, and that's it.
Because the reason why I find this interesting is because that is the basic steps of a nephrostomy tube.
Yeah,
which is arguably should be in the armamentarium for any general urologist.
Yes.
Yet I can't name a single general urologist, myself included, who is comfortable doing that. But yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things if we're going to circle this back to the topic of choosing, right? There are people I've met, Tom, he was in San Francisco at the time when I went to go see him do it. He has a passion for that, like teaching people how to put an ultrasound on somebody's back, find a kidney, and put a needle right where you need it, right? So like, that wasn't what drew him, but now it's a big part of what you do, right? So it's kind of crazy when we talk about how do you advise somebody how to pick a specialty. It's like, well, do it.
I mean, I think in medical school, right, the first step is like medicine or surgery. I mean, that's the first like fork in the road.
Yes.
I mean, but like for you, even you went like multiple forks, right? Because you're like, okay, I want to do surgery, but I don't think I want to do general surgery or any of the subspecialties of that. Yeah. And then there's, other, like, you could have done OBGYN. Like, that's another, like, surgical specialty that's not surgery. Like, how did that happen for you?
The one theme that I'm seeing across all 3 of our stories is that wherever we ended up, we found this elegance in what we were doing. That there was music in it. That, like, the dialysis patients, for you, it's music, right? You can see a story, and you hear it, you feel it, you want to do it. Right? For you, it wasn't that. But, like, in the transplant, you heard some of that. It sounds pretty coherent, what they're trying to accomplish here. Somehow you could hear that in the atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome. Even though I still like I say, from a urology perspective, fleshing out our branches, one of the branches I was just like, you know what? I don't know how much I want to do, because on that split between medicine and surgery, it was like complement disorders. I was like, this is highly complex. So I feel like the same, like, the call away. I read about complement disorders, and I was just like, that's too scary. A lot of big problems, no solution. And now there are solutions though, right?
Yeah. Now we actually have in the last like 2 years like an explosion of agents. It's pretty cool. Now they're being spread from paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, which typically comes first, and then C3G or atypical hemolytic uremic syndrome, IgA.
Can you lecture on this?
No, I mean, but like I read about it because I'm number one, I'm interested. And number two, like this is why I think nephrology maybe like is going to make a comeback or is making a comeback in terms of increasing interest in medical students and residents, because finally we have these answers. We have treatments. Like, you watch TV and like all these things that you see are like, oh, a new biologic for something like skin related or GI related. We just haven't had that in nephrology. And like, finally, we have something more than just an ACE inhibitor or an ARB. So I think it's exciting in my nerd.
I agree with you, and it's all in the last couple of years. We have all these medications, GLP-1s, SGLT2s. They weren't there. So we have all these choices we never had. But I want to kind of take you back to the biopsies and procedures, and I'm going to kind of spin you off on a different angle here, because you mentioned how easy this is, meaning like, oh, they market it, come in, and it's all true. I do native biopsies, and it takes a little longer, they're a little deeper.
Yeah.
But part of why it's true is because you have this system around you, and you have transplant fellows or regular fellows, and the biopsies can take a while if you have to admit them and then watch them afterwards and see if there's bleeding, and that can be a lot of paperwork and not so much fun and all that other stuff. So you're in an academic environment, and now given transplant do gravitate towards that, because where do you find transplant centers in academic centers? But you made a choice at some point to say, I'm going to be academic.
Oh, yes.
Versus private, nephrology. And how active was that?
Super active. So initially my thought was, I really love teaching, and clearly I'm going to do transplant, but this is before the pandemic, before loans were paused, and before there were ever any public service loan forgiveness. And I owed a lot of money in loans. And honestly, my concern was, if I go into academics, I'm not going to be able to pay them off, so I better go into private practice. So I found myself kind of a hybrid that does half transplant and half general nephrology in private practice. And I signed early during my fellowship in a private practice in the Midwest, and within 2 months I knew that I had made a terrible mistake. So I realized seeing 70 patients a day on the weekends, and working at every other weekend and being on call every single night. No joke. If a patient was admitted to a unit that I was working on that day, they're calling me. Regardless if I have to go in or not, I'm still being woken up every day, 1, 2, 3 in the morning too. So I just realized, this is not for me. My wife and I would have gotten divorced. It would have been terrible. So I sought out an academic medical center, that I could just be a transplant nephrologist, and it's the best decision I made. And you know what? I'm like all of my friends from medical school, pretty much they all got their loans forgiven because they ended up 10 years, they did it, and I would have had mine paid off too. I wasn't eligible. So, and you know what? I still don't regret it. I'm happy I did that, because it showed me what I thought I wanted to make me really appreciate what I have now.
Yeah. So you saw the grass wasn't truly green, and then you came right back. So the decisions about what part of medicine and what you do there are sometimes grounded in financial security and external factors. When you were originally kind of going into medicine, or job security, better than what were you filing, did that weigh into this, or was that?
Not really, but I vividly remember during my third year of medicine residency, I was on a cardiology rotation, and a cardiologist says to me, she's like, "You're going into nephrology? You're not going to make any money." And that has stuck with me until now, because it couldn't be further from the truth. This cardiologist just truthfully didn't know what they were talking about, because that is not true. And I'm glad that I went into nephrology, because that's where my heart was, because, the money will come, and I'm able to pay off my loans. I'm able to, do what any reasonable, person can do. So I really do feel like money should not, drive you.
I think that's a sign of a lot deeper issues. I think one of my favorite things about you bringing up that point is that the second that somebody would try to point you to something or away from something solely for the sake of money, that's one of the things, what do I want my son to learn from? That's one of the things I would hope he learns, that it shouldn't be about the money. When you're picking your career and you're having this vocation, the money is important depending on okay, I have a goal of this is what I want to accomplish. Okay, well then you need to get a job that's commensurate with your goal that you want to accomplish. But if that money choice becomes the main thing of what you want to do, it just becomes it leads you down a murky road. And I think there's an ancient, to bring us back to the topic of medicine, it's not ancient, but it's one of my favorite books The Keys to Medicine and a Guide for Medical Students. It was written around 1100. And in there, in the beginning of it, so you realize this is not a problem unique to our time. He mentions it in that book, in the introduction, that like, if you're becoming a doctor for the sake of money, you probably should pick something else.
Well, not to mention, I don't know how I could have gotten through it. Yeah. Like, the amount of sacrifices that I made, that we all made to get to where we are, like, I would have just given up. If it were just for the money, I'd be like, screw it, I'll do something else. Yeah. You know, I'll be in like an Instagrammer.
Social media.
But often it's a lot easier to say where we are, right, to talk about this. But, you know, there are people who are looking at, well, if I'm going to put in all this effort, what is it going to be worth in the end? Are we taking that long still? Well. And the general concept is that, you know, if you're in private practice, you're making more money.
Yes.
You're working more hours, you're seeing more patients, as you mentioned. You probably will burn out, if you want to use that term, earlier, and maybe that means you retire earlier.
But you probably get more vacation. But like, yeah, there's a cost to it, and for me, the cost was too great. It would probably have been my marriage and my coronary arteries.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to like individual decision making, because for some people, the private world is right.
Yeah.
Okay? You know, there's a reason why we're all here in academics right now.
Yeah.
And saying this, because, you know, we all chose that somehow to get there. But I think it's important to point out for some people, that's okay. That's what they wanted. You know, maybe they don't have that interest in teaching. So when they have to teach, they feel like it's a unrewarded burden, and they'd rather be seeing patients and making, everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
Again, we're a selected group.
But I think that's what my favorite thing about the idea for this podcast is to look at all those possibilities. Like you talked about the branches. People's careers take them all different kinds of ways and winding roads and places and stops. And, you know, you're lucky if you get to really plant your roots and grow really big in one place. You know, that's just a general life adage. But like, I think that's why we're here, is to flesh out that path.
Yeah.
Good. So you had the private practice bit for how long?
Just for a year, because if I didn't stay for the full year, I would have owed them a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I stayed for the year, but I truthfully believe that it made me a better doctor. And it made me more it made me more efficient.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just happy that, you know, I've ended up where I have, but I don't think that I'd be where I am if I didn't, you know, take the path that I was given. You know, I think my father said to me one time after I did terribly on the MCAT, first time, he said, the road to success is crooked. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, if it were easy, everyone would do it. So it's like, you go back to the drawing board, and if you really want it, you'll do it again. And then I did a lot better the second time, and like, you know, got into medical school, and you know, that's it.
It's a tough road, and obviously, hopefully, it works out, right? So you went from what you described as all these patients on call pretty much every night, and you know, now you're in an academic center. How does that compare?
Oh, I mean, well, it's night and day. The most important thing to me is that I can teach every day. I'm around medical students, residents, fellows. I'm around nurses that are truly interested in transplant, and pharmacists. They're all super smart and also are great at teaching. And then my colleagues are all doing research, and we're all teaching each other and trying to advance the field. It's something that you do not see in private practice. And then, not to mention, like, you have protected time to teach, protected time to do research. So it's a great thing, but it's not for everyone. You know, some people are just like, look, I just want to like go to work, see patients, and go home and not have to like give presentations or publish. You know, like, great, like, we need private practice docs in all different specialties.
Because who's supposed to be out in the tertiary levels?
Well, not in the tertiary level.
Yeah, sorry. So my brain flips it. I have the schematic in my head of like further out from the center. Yeah. So it's tertiary in terms of distance. So yeah, we're tertiary in terms of complexity, right? So who's supposed to be out there? That's what primary care is supposed to be. That's why I should probably flip that schematic in my head, right?
So here you're in this academic position, and you don't have as many weekends and nights, I assume?
No. So I mean, I work one at, like, here. I work one at like I think 10 weekends a year, and then I'm on call maybe like 3 or 4 of the nights that of the 10 weeks that I'm working inpatient. So really not very often. And then the amount of calls that I'm getting at night, because they're filtered through a fellow first, are decreased substantially. And then I don't have to go in at night. If someone needs to go in at night, it'll be the fellow. But like, yeah, we all did that during our training. Like you need to. But it's nice as like now an older person to not have to do that.
To be able to sleep or
It's
just
important.
say, call the fellow.
This is the really interesting thing. I got to this job, and then, like, for a little brief window, I got that. And then I had a son, and now I'm back. So
Yeah.
I'm in
You're on
residency
call
again.
all the time.
But yes, but it's definitely a good thing to have when you get it. But the thing is, I'm still thinking about my primary care, tertiary care model. Because I'm viewing things from the center out. People are labeling primary, secondary, but that's from the outside in. That's the only difference in why we got to our little labels, right? But I use that schematic to try to explain to people when they're, theoretically, if a medical student were to ask me, what kind of specialty should I choose? Because urology has a practice in the primary care, right? Like in terms of BPH and things like that, has a practice in secondary care, outpatient surgery. And then tertiary, like in the inside of very complex cancers and things like that. So in transplant, how would you delineate that same slice? Like what's the most, distal, like in terms of the kidney failure, chronic kidney disease, right?
I'm sorry, I don't really understand the question.
Understand the question. Yeah. So like primary care doctors, private practice nephrologists would be seeing mostly what kind of condition?
So, yeah, they'll see a lot of hypertension, diabetes, chronic kidney disease. Very often, when they have these other more complex diseases, these glomerulonephritis, the HUS that we're mentioning a lot, they'll send them to other places, right? It's where they'll take care of that.
Because they're
rare. Yeah, and we might have to use these fancy medications. We're not comfortable with them.
Yeah.
Who's going to monitor that? And the patients are very often saying like, oh, this isn't regular stuff here. I want to go to the big city, in this case, Madison. It's all relative since I grew up in New York City. They'll say the big city and get that, that expert opinion, where sometimes it's actually the same person who goes to other places and they don't fully realize that. Yeah, so that's kind of the bread and butter primary care kind of stuff. Then there's that middle glomerulonephritis kind of stuff, where there's a whole range of those, where there's really complex ones, and then there's kind of other ones like IgA nephropathy, which everybody feels like they can manage, and
lupus,
and lupus.
Yeah, keep that on the primary. Like there are private practice nephrologists.
It all depends.
that would do that.
or polycystic kidney disease, but like, I mean, it's basically like it depends on a lot of times the nephrologist and their comfort level and whether they're like, yeah, we probably should get you to a specialized center. And also the patient, are they savvy enough to know like, this is not typical. I really should go to, a center that specializes in this, that I could be enrolled in a research study. And, I know that this is kind of an aside, but I think in like every family, if there's not at least one person that's kind of in the medical field, it is extraordinarily difficult to manage. I mean, I know from my in-laws, they just had my wife who's a nurse, and like we help them tremendously to navigate the healthcare field, because if you don't know anything about it, like you can be be told terrible advice or be led down the wrong road. Like my father-in-law, like almost had to have like part of his colon taken out, like in the North Woods, because like he's just like, whatever, you're the doctor, that's what you say. And like, no, we sent him to a specialized center, and they're like, no, and they were able to fix it, without opening him up. Yeah. But it's like, if you don't know what you don't know, right? And things are changing every day. So like, you probably should send the more complicated things to the experts. Like, look, man, I don't know how to do anything with an HVAC system, so I'm not going to muck around with them, and I hire a professional.
Yeah. That's the same argument I'm having right now. I'm trying to fix my water softener, and I'm like, you know what? I should just call a plumber.
You know what? Great. Their expertise,
right?
Yeah.
But that's the same thing about us, the specialty. And so I should send them to the tertiary care center for like more advanced.
But like, you can have your just like, your kidney transplant 10 years out, doing great, no issues. And like, they do great with their general nephrologist. And a lot of general nephrologists are comfortable with that, and I'm happy for it.
Yeah.
Now, when there's an issue, like if they develop multiple skin cancers, or they develop a virus that can be deadly, or if they develop a cancer, now they're going to be on immunotherapy. They're going to be on chemotherapy, or their oncologist is talking about, multiple checkpoint blockers that can cause rejection, like, yeah, then they need to go back to their transplant center. And, you know, I think that's where we form our best relationships with the private practice nephrologists. Like, we need them and they need us, and we take care of patients together.
Yeah, I think that's a very important thing.
And it's a system. And I think sometimes we can kind of scare people into thinking like, oh, well, if you're going to be part of these big centers, these tertiary centers, you have to be just so good at everything to be that expert and this, that, and the other. But what's really happening in medicine is that the amount of information just keeps doubling and increasing so rapidly, but yet the education time is the same, right? We're becoming sub specialized in these things, and we get really good at certain things. And yeah, we're probably not as good at the other things because we don't do them as often. So sometimes these primary centers and what they're saying, they're really good at that stuff, right? And we're maybe not as good at it. But if it's some weird thing, we've got a specialist for a right thumb and a left thumb. That's what we do. Yeah. It's kind of funny that you're calling a plumber because I refer to urologists as the plumber.
But like this guy, that was part of the reason I felt justified in doing it. I'm like, I wouldn't let anybody call me other than a urologist for it. Why am I trying to figure out this water stuff?
And I'm so happy you're there, because there are a lot of times I'm like, even the transplant surgeons are like, we need a urologist.
Yeah.
Like, and I appreciate you a lot. And, we refer patients back and forth. And, like, I'm just happy that I don't have to do your job.
And I think that's the other point of this podcast is for everybody to start developing more appreciation for the whole picture. Because what happens a lot when you get assigned to your little silo, I got assigned to my little silo, is you start, like, your vision focuses. And then you start losing fact. And I think my favorite thing, part of the reason why I chose to stay here was, one, relationship with the transplant. There's a very interesting disease process I'd love to talk to you about afterwards. But just seeing, like, oh my God, like right next door, all these people, and everybody's willing to talk, everybody's willing to learn from each other, everybody's willing to teach, right? Like that was my biggest call to say in academics. Like the idea of being a urologist all alone in the middle of nowhere with nobody else to talk urology jokes with. I mean, what would I do? So
that sounds nice.
Yeah.
I'm gonna kind of put a wedge in it a little bit.
Yeah, go
right.
for it.
The reason why I didn't do transplant nephrology was the interaction that I was seeing between working with the transplant surgeons, and that can be really tough.
Can be.
And I can be dead wrong about this, but when it comes to transplant surgeons, you're usually talking about a subgroup of people who went into surgery. That's already a certain personality. Mm-hmm. Let's start with that. Then they subspecialize in transplant surgery. This is an even bigger ego, if you will, that's been sub-selected. And now they're working with medical people, nephrologists, who have been sub-selected to be the opposite of whatever they were selected to be.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of my medications being changed by surgeons, and I felt like, well, what is my purpose here? And that was
that was in private practice.
That was in an academic center. That was in training.
Oh, okay.
But part of why I chose not to pursue that was, well, I feel like I'm getting kind of overruled here, and what is my role?
Right.
You may have had a completely different experience or so, but how does it look now here? Like working with, we have so many transplant surgeons here. It's a huge center, so many transplant nephrologists. That interaction, like how does that feel? I guess more on a day-to-day, like how does that feel?
Yeah, I mean, I actually feel like I've been through the gamut with this at multiple different centers with the training and being in practice. And I can say that we have such a great group here of both transplant nephrologists and transplant surgeons that we all get along really well together. There really aren't like huge egos for the most part. Better than most centers. But yeah, it can get really messy when, the transplant surgeon is just like, basically, I'm right, you're wrong, what I say goes, and I've had that, and it's super frustrating, especially when they're like, basically they want to have the final word. They are the ones that want to be right, and so they'll say things about you behind your back. It can be childlike at times, but we have a great group here.
That's true. That's true of all of the structure of medicine. I think it's one of my brother's an emergency medicine doctor, and the thing about that complex you just described of wanting to have less or wanting to always be right, it had seeped through our careers in medicine into our personal relations. I remember when he was a resident and I was a resident, we would get yelling matches about management of conditions. I was just like, we're brothers. The coolest thing about having my relationship with him is that he completely cooled that fire with me in a way that, like, now when I'm in the hospital and I start feeling that kind of energy start to enter into a conversation, I'm like, how do I exit this conversation? right? Because my favorite thing about here is that I can openly be like, yeah, I'm really not the guy to tell you metastatic prostate cancer management of chemotherapy. Like, I'm a plumber. I'm subspecialized as an endourologist. And sure, maybe that's a dangerous thing to say, having just taken my oral boards. But like, because I do have to know that for oral boards. But I'll know that for like a multiple choice question. But when it comes to an actual conversation, somebody like, hey, like, which drug should I choose? You only know that by prescribing that drug over and over and over again.
But luckily, you have colleagues that do deal with that.
Right? And that's why the transplant surgeons here definitely feel like comfort. Like, we have a transplant nephrologist who comfortably manages complex medication lists.
And I think we kind of all know each other's like strengths, and we each have like niches within transplant because it's such a big field, and it's becoming, especially in like a tertiary center where like these people have been transplanted multiple times, have had recurrence of their native diseases or failure of their previous transplants. Like, it just gets super muddy and complicated. And there's one of us that kind of deals with a lot of these patients, or a lot of the conditions that maybe the transplant surgeon is afraid of. So we each have a job, you know.
Yeah, and I think that's the coolest thing about being an academic. If we go back to the schematic that I drew about the primary to tertiary, that's the coolest thing about being in the hub, right? About being in tertiary center, because when you're advising somebody what specialty they choose, okay, specialty be darned. Do you plan on working on the outside or on the inside, on the outside of the wheel or on the inside of the hub? Because that will more give them an idea of what it would look like. Because I think if there's any dream that I have for these kinds of things, that like medical students might be able to watch this and be like, oh yeah, man, it's gonna click something in and help them choose a specialty, so they're not constantly in that angst of being.
But also give them the freedom to think like, wow, I don't need to globally do all of this the rest of my life. I might need to get through some of this for certain exams, but there's an endpoint where I am the HUS guy.
I want to hear more about it.
But you know, like, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I do know it's the vast majority of things that we learn in medical school are obsolete within just a few short years.
Absolutely.
You know, I think about some of the things that I learned in medical school that I'm like, well, that was wrong. The evidence shows that was wrong. Medical school is to teach you how to, you know, like a doctor, basically to teach you physiology and anatomy and some basic pharmacology, and then you build. And that's what scared me the most about private practice, at least for me. I just was like, well, I'm not learning all the time and around people that are trying to advance the field or advancing me, and because of that, I'm stagnant. And because so many new things are happening, I'm not learning. And I'm just now stuck in the Stone Ages, like prescribing demeclocycline for hyponatremia. I remember I saw that when I was in private practice. I'm like, yep, I'm making the right decision to leave.
What is that one is a little over my head.
No,
you're gonna have to explain that.
It's like a really old antibiotic that basically they would use for management of hyponatremia, and it does not work, and it has side effects. That does not get at the root of the problem. So I
think that's the analog for that in urology is if I see somebody prescribed methanocal, I'm like, you haven't read a medical journal in how long? Like, have you ever talked to another urologist? Mm-hmm. Nobody prescribes methanocal that's supposed to combat an atonic bladder. It's supposed to give you spasms again, right? And there's no study that shows it actually works. But there are still people who will prescribe that. It's very interesting.
Like renally dosed dopamine.
Yeah.
It's another.
I mean, you know, we still see it.
Just feed the kidneys just a little bit pressure. A couple of things I want to hit just because they're unique and it's probably worth hearing. I apologize for not knowing this. We haven't worked together very long. So,
which is sad.
Yeah, this is true. I looked at your profile and there were a couple of letters there. There was an MBA.
Yeah. I during medical school, I went to business school.
During medical school?
Yes.
Did you take extra time?
Yeah, so I did 3 years of medical school, then basically did a year where I did a full-time MBA, as well as did like kind of night and weekend classes with executive MBAs with a like kind of a healthcare focus. And there was a cohort of like 13 of us MBA people that did it together. And it was very enlightening because like they made it very clear that I did not need to know very much about business to go. And I kind of learned on the fly, but I thought it was very beneficial. And again, it allowed me time to mature, realize what I like about medicine and what I want to do on a daily basis. I learned immediately, like, okay, I don't want to be a hospital exec, but I feel like I'm a better manager and that, I could like help to run a division or like a subset of a division. Like I could read a profit and loss statement. I could read the Wall Street Journal and not be terribly lost. So it was important. And I'm glad I did it and added to my student debt.
So those are all things you learned coming out of that, but why did you do it in the first place?
Variety of reasons. Honestly, I realized that, unfortunately, medicine is at least in part a business, and I thought maybe I would end up in private practice and would end up needing that. And yeah, I don't think that it's something that I use every day, but I think that the skills that I learned will be more applicable, in the future. I just thought, well, it's offered, and there's a way to do it, and it won't be too much of a time commitment. I'm not married. I don't have kids. So it's like, at least I'm not doing it on nights and weekends when I'm working already. Yeah. So that was the big draw.
So can I ask another question?
Yeah.
So because you said medical school that's where you learned to think. And so do you think MBA school kind of gave you another dimension to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because
how would you describe the difference?
Oh, it's like night and day. I mean, just the way that finance or economic people think, it's completely different. Just the way that you go after and kind of figure out a problem. It's not a differential diagnosis.
Yeah.
There's just like, no, this is the one right answer, and finance is like, this is the answer. Period. I prefer medicine, and I'm certainly better at thinking of that, probably just because I have more reps at it.
Yeah, because you spend more time. Do you see a version of you, like an alternate reality, like a multiverse?
No.
Hey, you would have MBA'd it.
No,
It's
definitely
interesting.
not.
See, vocation, it wasn't calling to you, right? So I think it's a very interesting.
I'm glad I was exposed to it, but I immediately knew, I'm glad I'm going to have some of these skills and learn how to kind of see how these people think and can double check their work to make sure that they're not screwing me. But at the same time, that's not what I want to do with my day.
The road to success is crooked.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say crooked. It's kind of just like a veer. It was elegant.
But also, I was very emotionally immature and academically advanced.
Yeah.
No, really though. And I'm glad that I got that extra year, because I went straight from college to medical school.
Yeah.
And another year was good for me.
Buddy, the thing is, I think that's a good way to describe a lot of the paths. Because you asked me about my tree. I would put that phrase extending into residence.
Yeah.
It wasn't until the end of residency that I was finally like, hold on.
I completely agree.
I gotta get a little bit more emotionally mature. I cannot be this academically advanced and still in need of emotional development, and I'm this far into the path.
I mean, just talk to my wife; she'll tell you.
So I'm gonna kind of re-angle us again, throwing it in there. So there's family, right? This is another thing, right? So in this academic job, this that we're all describing and talking about, is there time? How does it look?
Yeah, I'm not the one to talk to about very good work-life balance, because I love my job so much and I'm so dedicated to it that I kind of want to think about it all the time and help my patients and do work outside of the workplace. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly time for family. I want to make time for my wife and our relationship. And yeah, there's definitely time. Like anything in life, and especially every marriage that you have to work at. I mean, you have a kid. I know that you have kids too. Okay.
These are and that's why I wear these. Everybody's like, you have vibrant Crocs. That's honestly, it reminds. My wife has a matching pair, and we bought the custom gibbets to put our kids' names.
That's great.
This was her design. She picked this out. This is probably one of my favorite pairs of Crocs.
I
got a little bit out of a left field question. Was AI going to take our jobs?
Oh my God.
Yeah, definitely not. And if for any reason, it's because we are dealing with human beings.
Yeah. And
human beings are not straightforward, and you cannot just tell a human being this one thing and that's it. Yeah, I mean, there is a style, there is tact, there is tone, there is, a helping hand, a hand on the shoulder, there's no computer replacement for that. And then not to mention that, yes, medicine is science, but medicine is also art.
Yes.
And I do not think that AI is going to be capable of potentially the art of medicine. And especially surgically, I find it hard to believe that AI can take.
And here's the thing, my favorite surgery is laser nucleation of the prostate.
Okay.
And part of the reason why I love it is because you have to be able to feel. You cannot just be like, I'm going to take out this prostate and enucleate it, and do it well, right? Without having a human element of a hand on the scope in the prostate, and you can feel the
This is where Adam and I are like,
My mind is in all sorts of places. This thing looks like a peach. Is your finger like in the anus? I don't know.
urologist, and that's why I try my best not to talk about it. Because the second the conversation comes up, everyone's like, "You're doing what?" And I'm like, you know what? That's why we do it in the operating room with no windows, in a closed environment that people don't want to be in.
We haven't said the word penis once.
You got it. You know how long I've been fighting that?
I know.
so I agree with you, right? So this AI concept is, all right, maybe it'll feed us towards the right answers.
Yes.
We already have the internet and different things that help us find the answers to things. Okay, so that's all there, but you still have to interact with these patients.
Yes.
Explain to them why they're doing this. Explain to them why they should take this medication. No one's going to walk into a room and have something bark at them. You have this diagnosis based on your numbers, and therefore you should take this. No one's walking out taking that medication.
Right.
So it's all about interacting with people, relationships, and basically, because I like long-term relationships, I don't know, it obviously works better for me in that situation. But we're still selecting people who are going into medical school based on MCAT scores and grades, and so should we just hire all the hairdressers to be doctors?
No, I mean, I think that, like, clearly there's an amount of intelligence that's necessary, but I remember being in medical school with, like, we call them eggheads. It's like, you are super smart and, like, you set the curves in this subject, but, like, you cannot talk to anybody. Mm-hmm. And, like, I can talk to people, but, like, okay, not to say that is bad. Like, a lot of those people became radiologists or pathologists, and they're fantastic at their jobs. But, like, yeah, there's a human element of it. And so I think that you need to have somebody that can, like, critically look through research to make the right decision and to guide their patients to the right decision. Because, without the human element, then, like, we're nothing. And we can't treat people.
It's funny, because you can open a website now and be like, hey, I made this, right?
Yeah.
And imagine, like, going to see a doctor and it just feels like you're talking to AI. Like, as soon as that clicks in somebody's mind, that's when you'll realize that the art of medicine will never be taken over by AI. The business of medicine might slowly start to get more and more AI influenced. But the art of medicine, the art of taking care of somebody, helping them with their problems and get them a better life, that AI can't do. It's only natural intelligence that can do that. A human can help another human. So it's one of those things about, like, the basic element of what I believe in. Like, I don't think AI is going to... AI, actually, in that sense, by that answer, AI might take my job, but it won't ever take away my vocation, my career, my call. And I think that's the most important thing to remember about people who choose to do medicine, people who choose to do specific specialties, people who choose to be in specific places within this complex medical system that we all work in, right, is to know that they still feel a call there, and that'll help them, I think, stay and succeed and overcome the threat of AI. If the AI ever is threatening them. I think we should look at AI as our friend.
I agree.
AI is 100%, like, if we use it the right way. Actually, you know what? The one thing that still calls me away from this sometimes is, like, PhD. Like, I really want it. Like, if I could, like, I'd go back to college and just sit in philosophy lectures. But, like, I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I'm too busy.
Same with kids.
Doing surgeries that I can't describe to two nephrologists. But, yeah, AI is probably, I don't think it's ever going to replace us.
Good. So now I know where our jobs are safe.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share with us today?
No. I'm really excited to be where I am, and I'm happy to come to work every day because of the decisions that I made and the work that I put in. It doesn't feel like a job. It feels like more like a calling. So I'm happy to be here.
Good. Now we all know the crooked path is the right one.
That's right.
Thanks for coming.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great talking to you.